Hey everyone. Today I want to talk a little bit about Field Trip Health and that stock. Uh, Currently, it's kind of in a tough place, right? The entire market is in a tough place, and um, I guess tech stocks are in a tough place. Field Trip is not really a tech stock, but kind of all the growth, new age stocks are not doing very well now. Obviously, I think a lot of those suck. A lot of those are not good investments, and I think Field Trip is a pretty good investment. Not that you should just go into it alone. It should be part of a diverse portfolio where you have a bunch of psychedelic stocks, and of course, even that's incredibly risky. But I'm very bullish on the psychedelic space, and I think that these stocks will probably 100x within the next decade. And um, obviously, don't take financial advice from me or anyone online. I have no responsibility to you whatsoever, including a fiduciary one. But you'd be foolish anyways. You'd just be a moron to take advice online. So don't be a moron, please. Now, about Field Trip. Right now, I think they have a little under 10 offices. A little under 10 offices. So if you're watching this video, you probably know a little bit about Field Trip. If you don't know anything about Field Trip Health, then um, I recommend just visiting their website, Field Trip Health. And they basically are a psychedelic clinic, but not really, because there's no psychedelics that are, that are approved now for that kind of setting. There's no psychedelics that are approved, period, by the FDA in the U.S. Besides ketamine, but I don't consider that a real psychedelic, and most people wouldn't consider that a real, true psychedelic. It's just a quasi psychedelic at best. So but that's the only thing that's available. So that's what Field Trip Health is doing now. Field Trip Health today is operating a business where they literally are providing trips to people. They facilitate a ketamine trip, which is a quasi psychedelic experience, and then they do post trip, what is called the term is integration, post trip integration, basically post trip therapy. That's what they do. They charge a good amount. Now, they used to charge quite a bit more. They used to charge quite a bit more than they're charging now. I just took a quick glance at the website. And last time I took a glance at it was maybe like 8, 9 months ago. So they charge quite a bit more. Um, I don't look at the site that often. It's not that much of a dynamic space, so it's not really there's nothing interesting happening right now. Just everything's in the pipeline. If you're bullish on the space in the way that I'm bullish on the space, there's not really much that's gonna happen in the near term that's gonna shift me to a more bullish position than I already am at, and there's very little that's gonna there's a lot actually that could take it to the downside, like say the FDA says we're never gonna allow psychedelic therapy. That would completely ruin my entire 100x thesis and play, and it wouldn't work out. I'll be wrong. That's why you shouldn't go all in on any one thesis, on any one play. Even though I'm unbelievably bullish on this, even though I still won't put more than maybe I probably won't put more than 25% of my entire portfolio ever into that space, into the psychedelic space. And currently it's a lot less than 25%. And probably at peak, I won't put more than 25. Now, say it 100x's, and then it ends up being an enormous percentage of my portfolio. Over time, I'll sell obviously over time, but that's something that would happen in 10 years. So I acknowledge that there's incredible risk, risk to the downside, and there's a lot of opportunity the upside, but it's not going to come in the short term. So I just don't check too much. I don't check those sites a lot. I used to when I was first researching them, and it was just very interesting, especially from some place like a place like Field Trip Health, which is very retail. It's a very retail, customer focused, customer oriented thing. It's very interesting, very different than other psychedelic plays like MindMed or GH Research. Um, Different than a Thai for now, because those don't actually have clinics where they're already earning revenue by having, having people trip out, helping people trip out. No one else pretty much is doing that yet. Field Trip Health is the only one that's doing it. So that's why it's part of my diversified psychedelic portfolio. Um, but so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that a little bit. So back to the point of the video. So Field Trip is already doing these services, right? What's the cost on these things? Let's just think about that. Very rough estimation, right? Extremely rough, not precise. Let's say and this is going to be ultra conservative assumptions when I have such a high conviction play. I with my assumptions, I'm ultra conservative, because if the model or the approach or the valuation stands up to those assumptions, then that's pretty good. You don't want to use stupid BS easy assumptions, right? You want to go hardcore. So, and also in each of these points, they're starting points for branches of research that we need to do. Like, my first assumption is going to be on who needs to sit there with you while you're tripping out, right? That's an assumption. Does it need to be an MD? Does it need to be a nurse? Does it need to be a PhD MD, a therapist? Who knows? Does it need to be a team? It doesn't need to be a team. No, it doesn't. But let's think about who it needs to be. But whatever we assume is the case, we can go ahead later on and do research and fill in those gaps in our knowledge, right? But we could start with a very, very broad and conservative set of assumptions. So let's say you need like a PhD MD sitting there, and they're going to be charging like 300 an hour to sit there with that person, right? 300 an hour. But on top of that, you have all the other expenses. You have, they're not just charging 300 an hour. If you're hiring them on staff, there's other expenses, like literally like payroll tax. You have to pay half the payroll tax yourself. They pay half the payroll tax if they're an employee. If they're a contractor, they have to pay the full payroll tax themselves. But say they're not a contractor, say they're an employee, you got the 7.5% on top for payroll tax. Just that alone brings it up quite a bit, right? Just that alone brings it up, what, seven, let's say 8% times 300, that's another 24 bucks per hour just on top of that. Is that right? So yeah, 8 7, yeah, 21 to 24 bucks, 7 to 8. Then add healthcare, add like not breaks, but all the extra benefits they're gonna get, not breaks. Assume no breaks. I mean, you can just add the whole package of things. So maybe retirement plan, a set of benefits, healthcare, days off. So all that together, let's round it up to 500 bucks. So 500 bucks an hour, right, for that person. So, and then the facility, all that stuff, let's add another 500. So 1,000 cost. Extremely conservative. Right now they're losing money. Before they were charging 2,000 bucks. They were charging 2,000 approximately for one trip, or over 2,000. Now it's quite a bit less. It's like 700 bucks. So under this insane assumption, they're losing money. Now, if we do more research and we see that, you know, um, you're able to do it at a much lower cost, then that'll be good, and I'm sure that's the case. But so we're talking about 1,000 bucks here, right? All in cost. That's a lot. And what are the drivers of this cost, right? The drivers of this cost, even though we're talking about like something in the future, brand new type of business, psychedelic therapy, the drivers are the most basic and plebeian and the most traditional drivers of cost that we've ever had in business: real estate, land, and labor. Basic land and labor. So the labor piece is wild, right? So under my assumption, you need a very, very skilled person to be able to operate this business. An incredibly skilled, incredibly scarce, and highly compensated, relatively highly compensated person. That's a negative. That's a downside, right? The beauty of tech, the beauty of innovation is that you have very low cost of providing the good or service, and you're able to scale it massively. You're able to scale it massively without having to worry about labor without having to worry about labor at all, right? Imagine Instagram or imagine WhatsApp. Those companies sold for billions and they had not that many employees from what I recall. If I'm not mistaken, WhatsApp, they had very few employees. I don't want to lie on this thing and say a wrong number, but I think under 25 potentially under 25. Maybe I'm even overestimating it. So, and they sold for billions because they weren't making any revenue, of course, but their ability to expand and make revenue in the future, if monetized properly, was 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 the right word here um, is outsized relative to the inputs, or another way to say it, it is asymmetric, deeply asymmetric. So, if I have an ice cream shop and I open 1,000 ice cream shops, there's a deeply symmetric aspect to that, right? In each one, I have to hire a certain amount, get some land, get some stuff, get some capital equipment, and then you have some recurring equipment, right? The ice cream, so labor and ice cream is going to be recurring, and then the machines and the land, assuming it's not a lease, assuming I buy the land, those are one-time fixed costs. And so as I expand, my profits will expand. They will surely expand if I'm making a profit from each shop I own, right? A bunch of ice cream shops, great. But but they're going to expand in a symmetric way. They will expand in a symmetric way, not in an asymmetric way. Things that allow you to scale massively with just almost the same amount of initial input. Like, say you start an app called Instagram and you have your first 100,000 users, then you do you do some kind of round Y Combinator, you do your A series, you continue with that, you're moving towards IPO. Along that path, you have 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, 100 million users, right? And then 100 million, everyone's picking you up. All the news people are talking about you now. Wow, 100 million users. So, but on that path, maybe with 10,000, you had 10,000 users, you had like a team of two, the initial founders. And finally, at 10,000, you realized, okay, this is something cool. We need to start making a business out of this or scale. That's 10,000. Maybe 100,000, you have 5 employees, maybe a million, you still have the 10 million users of your new app Instagram, maybe you have 10, and then 100 million, maybe you have 15, right? 100 million, you have 15. Very asymmetric, right? Your users went from 10,000 to 100 million. 10,000 to 100 million. So that's an increase from 10,000 to 10 million would be 1,000. A 10,000 fold increase. 10,000 fold increase, right? The same increase on your employee size, a 10,000 fold increase on your employee size from 2 would be 2,000, would be 20,000, right? So if you were a traditional ice cream shop and you started just you and your buddy, 2 people, and then you expanded and now you're serving 100 million customers, if two were able to operate that little one, 20,000, not 2,000, I'm sorry, 20,000, right? 10,000 fold increase. 20,000 people would be required to serve 100 million customers. Now, probably even more, because now you'd have an HR department, a finance department, a risk department, a compliance department, so many departments, a real estate leasing department. You'd have a purchasing department. You'd have quite it would just be a different universe with that business, a true brick and mortar storefront type of business versus an ultimate software business where it's deeply asymmetric, where you have a 10,000 fold increase in customers, but only a few x increase in your head count, right? Again, asymmetric. It's not possible everywhere. It's by the physics of things. It's not possible everywhere. It's possible in certain places. Made possible really by the internet and the investments made after World War II. Really, the incredible, the lucky, the benevolent, beautiful investments made after World War II that have allowed society to become so rich. That's important, right? If we didn't have those wires, If we didn't have internet, if we didn't have satellites, we wouldn't have that kind of capacity to generate these kind of asymmetric returns. Things would be far more symmetric, as they literally were throughout all of history, as they could go back to being if we fuck up civilization. And that's a different topic. So let's not fuck up civilization. We don't want to do that. So in that model, in that symmetric asymmetric approach, the way I'm describing field trip is in a deeply symmetric way. It's like the most symmetric business. One person with one therapist sitting there in some building. Very symmetric. Why am I so excited about it, right? Well, beyond the non-financial aspects, right? Now, with finance, I stick to the financial. I mean, if I'm looking at a business, very rarely am I gonna like put something beyond the financial in it. But I will sometimes. Like I won't own tobacco companies, period, because I just don't want to own them from a moral perspective. In the same way, I would want to own psychedelic companies, even if they weren't great businesses, because I believe in them so much and I want to be part of it. Literally, I want to be part of it, even if I'm not making money on it, even if I'm losing a little bit of money. Now, if I thought they were shitty businesses, I would never say I'm gonna put 25% of my portfolio. Right? That would be fucking crazy. I would say I'll put 1 or 2% of my portfolio, but something clearly makes me think that these will be great businesses. So my insane assumption here probably is gonna have to be changed or at least attenuated in some ways, right? I'm sure field trip management, massive field trip shareholders, large shareholders who want to see this company succeed, and also just benevolent people who want to see a lot of people try psychedelics and get the benefits of psychedelics. I'm sure they're all sitting there right now at field trip thinking about how do we bring this to the masses in an easier way. Do we need to have a building? Do we need to have a therapist? How can we do this at home? How can we do this in different settings? So if you go from the scale of like one therapist in one room in one building and you move towards like an ultimate like flexible thing where they just send you, like imagine you move from there to like a group setting, maybe you have a group setting, then a retreat, then some kind of like Zoom call where everyone's tripping out, and then to like they just mail you a little chemical, and then you take that chemical and you have the entire interaction in the app, and it's facilitated somehow with the app. Now that needs to be approved. First of all, that needs to be approved. Second of all, and more importantly, that needs to be proven that that is okay. That that's gonna have good outcomes on average over the long term on a large number of people when we have them trip out on their app at home with something that we send to their house. That it's okay. That it's not gonna fuck people up. That it's gonna be fine, because that's the most important thing, right? We wanna give this medicine in a way that benefits people, right? But it is medicine after all, so we have to be a little careful. So so what am I getting at here? So I think that right now it's not gonna look profitable, these companies, and they aren't profitable, obviously. And I think that if you take their current models and you just say, oh, this is how it's gonna be in 10 years, it's not gonna look profitable, right? But if you take, especially with field trip, if you take that model and you start tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it and see how far we could tweak it until we were basically to an ultimate scalable approach where we literally just send you a pill and you just trip out with an app. AI helps you trip out, and maybe there's some in-person stuff for higher doses, or maybe there's some group things for high or medium doses. Maybe there's a suite of things that you could do, and maybe there's different price ranges, so things could be expanded. And I think in the long term, seeing how these things expand will be um, a good business lesson for all of us.